Hello everyone. On behalf of the Sri Lanka Technological Campus, I warmly welcome all of you for our second International Perspective webinar on From Crisis to Character. For today's session, we have more than 400 participants from India, Indonesia, Kyrgyzstan, Malaysia, Nepal, Nigeria, Philippines, Thailand, United Arab Emirates, US, and Sri Lanka. Once again, I warmly welcome all of you for our session. Please rise for the national anthem of Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka Mata, Apa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Sundara Siri Marini, Surani Ati Sobhamana Lanka, Manya Ranaya Nekamal Palakuru Pili Jaya අපහට සැපසිරි සෙත සදනා ජීවනයේ මාතා පිළිගනු මැන අපවත්ති පූජා නමෝ නමෝ මාතා අප ශ්‍රී ලංකා නමෝ 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 ජීවන දෙමිනේ නිතින අප පුබුදු කරන් මාතා ඥාන වීර වඩ වුණින රැගෙන යනු දැන ජය භූමිකරා එක මවකගේ දරු කැල බැවිනා යමු යමු වී නොපමා Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Namo
I now cordially invite our guest of honor, Mrs. Shirani Ranasinghe, the Deputy Librarian of the University of Sri Jayawardenepura, to address the participants.
Thank you, Hasita. Dear participants, resource person and moderator and all the participants, I'm indeed happy to be invited to this timely needed webinar today. First, I would like to thank Mr. Hasita Koratage, Librarian SLTC, for organizing this event and letting me have this valuable opportunity to share a few words with you. Today we are facing a big crisis. It's no understatement to say that the pandemic COVID-19 has drastically changed the way we live our lives. It has jolted our entire lives, including the places that we find comfort. Although being on lockdown has been pretty grueling on balance, as every coin has two sides, we all have to accept that there are some things about quarantine life that are worth preserving. So at any challenging time period, it's vital necessity to maintain our mental well-being. There's a famous quote which says, difficult roads always lead to beautiful destinations. Therefore, we could look at any crisis in an optimistic angle. We must understand ways and methods to transform any crisis into a beneficial opportunity and to survive as successful individuals. So I'm not going to talk further. I think our well-experienced resource person, Rosen Kure, is here and will conduct an interesting and valuable session on crisis to character. So wish you all a fruitful session and thank you again and over to you, Hasita.
Thank you, Mrs. Chirani Ranasinghe. Now I warmly welcome our esteemed guest speaker, Ms. Roseanne Correa, and the session moderator, Ms. Jessica Fernando. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and being with us today. Ms. Roseanne is a business and organizational psychologist and the founder and lead coach of Ford Consultancy. Locally, she worked on projects for more than 80 companies, and also she is a published author and a certified coach from the International Coach Federation. She has over 14 years of experience working in Australia, UK, Abu Dhabi, and Sri Lanka. Jessica Fernando, today's session moderator, is a graduate in psychology from Coventry University and is a psychologist and training at Ford Consultants. Thank you very much for both of you. And the session is over to you, Jessica.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Fernando, and I will be your moderator today. A gentle reminder that you can post any questions that you have on the Q&A. You should see the Q&A button on the bar below on your screen. You can keep your questions coming right throughout this session. However, I suggest that you wait until the 45-minute mark to post your questions. This is because at the end there will be a discussion where Roseanne will be answering a select number of questions on a first come, first serve basis. I also encourage you to have with you a pen and paper, and we look forward to your participation in the activities. We urge you to post your responses in the chat when you are asked questions so that we keep this session interactive. Thank you very much. Okay, Roseanne, over to you.
Hi, Rosen, you are muted.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Hasita. Thank you, Madam Shirani. Thank you, the entire team at SLTC for having us here. Now, before I actually want to share anything, I would like to ask you a few questions. How have you been feeling in the last 1 week or so? If I actually get you to write how you have been feeling in a form of one emotion, right? So if it is sadness, if it is frustration, whatever it is, can you please post this on the chat box, okay? So you can do that while I'm speaking. Welcome, everyone. I know there are people from numerous countries. It's an indeed pleasure to address you here from Sri Lanka. We were all, there was something common for all of us at one point in time. We were all asked to stay at home. All of us were in a way in a form of lockdown at some point. But now coming out of this lockdown, we are in different places. So some of us could go out, some of us still can't. Some of us are in a partial lockdown, and in worst cases, probably curfew as well in some cases. But from wherever you are, we welcome you, and we hope that this session for the next 45 minutes, you will be able to get something out of it. Okay. So I'm going to actually post something to you. Please keep posting those emotions, and I have a reason to ask this. because I'm going to show you something during the presentation, what happened in the last 3 weeks when I conducted these webinars. What I find kind of interesting about this COVID time, starting from March, is that as a humankind, we thought we knew it all for some reason. Okay, we thought that science was so advanced that we were almost unbreakable. And we thought that our greatest enemy would be mass weapons of destruction, weapons of mass destruction, or in other cases, even artificial intelligence becoming more intelligent than human beings. But this year, 2020, was different that way. A minute virus was introduced to the humankind, right? And how did we respond there? This pandemic caught every one of us by surprise. We didn't expect it, and we were not prepared for it. And even the biggest of scientists, the world-class scientists, they couldn't come up with a solution. Okay, we still don't have a vaccine. Yet we are obviously doing the experiments, but we don't know where we are in the wave. Okay, now we could be definitely, we are not in the beginning, but we could still be in the middle. We don't know whether the second, the third, the fourth wave. We don't know what this COVID-19 is going to do medically to all of us, right, in the future. However, all of us as human beings, we have what we call, we have conscience. We also have the will to make up our minds about what this COVID-19 and the lockdown can become to us and our families, right? See, I think another thing that was different about COVID is that before, in a crisis, human beings, all of us, during a crisis, we reached out for help, right? And when we saw people in a crisis, we readily rendered a hand to them, because that's how human beings, Homo sapiens, survived, right? And that's because we have learned to live in groups. Because we learned to live in groups, we sort of knew how to mitigate the effects of a crisis, right? We looked after each other, and that's why we are here as a human race. In fact, if you do believe in anthropology and evolution, in anthropology books, it says that why Homo sapiens survived versus Homo neanderthals were that Homo sapiens learned how to live in groups, right? So they hunted in groups, they went to war in groups. So that really helped them. Okay, we also during times of crisis, we also call it the huddle effect. The huddle effect is like, we protect each other. We in a huddle, right? Unfortunately, in COVID, we were asked to do the exact opposite of it. We were told, if you love your parents, if you love your friends, don't go visit them. Right, so it was difficult for us because it's very counterintuitive for a human being. Okay, now I'm going to actually share something to you, or rather with you. Okay, so we're going to talk about a well-being, about us. Okay, how are we going to be prepared in our character to face this crisis, not only for the crisis, but also the times after crisis? So I would like you to rate yourself on this wheel. So on the core of it, it's from 0 to 100. What was your physical well-being like in the last 2 weeks or so? Okay, what rating will you give? Physical, emotional, mental, then spiritual, financial, social, family, and environmental. I'll give you just quarter of a minute. Very quickly, do a self-assessment. Okay, So now physical well-being. Now there's a lot of material out there about healthy eating, about exercises, about what we basically need to avoid during this time. I don't need to repeat myself because if you Google that, you will be able to find out. But I want to actually talk about things that don't get much attention. One is actually sleep. Okay. What a crisis does is it takes you by surprise, and it's a bit of a shock, right? And especially if it has created some form of a imbalance in your family and yourself. So, for example, some of us may have lost our jobs. Some of us are only getting half of our pay. Our children are at home. Our spouses are, and our older parents are at home. We have to ensure that our children study. Some have homeschooling, and also we have to also work from home. So sometimes you may be sharing one tiny room where you and your spouse both have to work side by side, right? Before COVID-19 hit us, in our family, there was a sense of intricate balance. It was implied. It's like nobody defined it, nobody put it in paper, but the mother, the father, the children, the older parents, whoever was in this family knew exactly what to do, right? And it was implied. Our roles were implied. And it was kind of known. So who wakes up in the morning, when they wake up in the morning, who makes tea, who cooks, and it was, and there was a routine. So it was easy. But what COVID did was it brought work home. And when that happened, a huge time component that you spend outside of work, outside of home, came home, right? So what happens was this system, this intricate balance in our family system was broken, was disturbed. And it's not only a stress for us, but it's also a stress for everyone around us, especially our children. Now we think that, you know, they have things to do, right? I mean, I have a 4-year-old and a 6 months old, but I always think of my 4-year-old, oh, this is the time for him to play, so let him play. Yes, that's great. But sometimes maybe the fact that we are all at home and the home is more crowded during the day probably it can affect him, right? In the same way, if you have teenage children, it's different. I will actually come to that when we talk about family more. But the fact that the work came home, that became a bit of a threat to some of our families. Okay, and that's because now physically we don't probably might not have the time to cook. We might not actually have some of us may have a lot of time, but some of us may not have the time. Even how we work, right? You know, our posture, we might not give much attention. Now, back at office, you probably have this particular chair that is ergonomically designed, or at least like a decent chair. But here, when there's no room, sometimes some of us may be working from our beds, right? And because we want to change the position, we may not give much attention to how we are seated, right? But over a period of time, this is what the musculoskeletal diseases, illnesses can take place. So, you know, the back aches, the aches behind your neck, and even in your arms, how you really place the arms, your eyesight, especially if you're always looking at the screen under artificial light. Say before, maybe you had artificial light, but you at least had that time to go to work, right? And if you're doing a very stressful job, you might be in front of the computer and that can really affect your eyes. And also in front of the computer and you don't have other people around, there is actually a little need for you to blink, right? So you would always keep your sort of eyes open, but then that can result in dry eyes. Also, then what about the Zoom and the Microsoft Teams? If you're always on meetings, on call, that can also affect your hearing. Okay, now it might not happen now, but if this is going to be the norm for the next 3, 4, 5 months, that can affect you. So you need to be aware of that, right? All of us need to be aware of that. Coming back to sleep, I mentioned something um, about using the bed as also your workstation, like some of us do that. That is not a really good idea, because during crisis, some of the things, one of the symptoms of how we respond to this stress is also by some of us sleep a lot, some of us sleep very little. Okay, some of us can't fall asleep as a result of stress. Like, especially imagine if it's a financial crisis because of COVID. The stress that you have due to that. So you might not be able to fall asleep. But on top of that, the fact that all the computers, the books, or whatever it is on your bed is also not helping you to fall asleep. Psychologically, it's because your mind is perceiving this space to be a space that you could do anything. No, the space is a space that you only use to sleep, right? So for example, right now I am in my bedroom, and that's because that's the only area that I could find to give you to do this webinar. Okay, the kids are outside and there are other people there. But there is a rule in the house that once whatever the webinar or the chat is over, you have to clear everything from the bedroom, right? And the bed has to be neat and clean, because it has to be in the night, it has to be inviting you to fall asleep. Why I'm spending a lot of time on sleep is that this is an area we neglect a lot. We focused a lot about COVID in the last 3 months, but there were other things that didn't go away, even though the COVID came about, right? So these are the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases, the heart disease, the high blood pressure, then the diabetes. We still have that. Okay, so unless we really take care about how we eat, how we sleep, even how we regulate our stress, these things can fluctuate during these things can, your pressure and your blood sugar, it can fluctuate depending on the stress. Okay, so moving on to the environment, once again, the environment now, from office environment or a library environment, in university environment, you're now here in your own homes, right? So I know we all don't have the luxury of having a big living area to begin with. So so this is actually this is my 11th or 12th webinar. So we've actually addressed about over 1,000 employees in Sri Lanka. So some of the grievances are that finding a place to work from is very tricky, right? So try and create that environment, but I know this is not an easy task. I'm sure you have already done that. See, another thing is some of us get very anxious, feeling that, oh, somebody else have that balance and we don't, right? Think about if you're married, think about the time that as you got married, maybe you were really excited, but for you to really settle down in that marriage and knowing what it's like to live with another person, it took a bit of time, right? So it's the same way, right? It's the same way when a new thing is introduced to our system, to really learn the ropes around this new crisis or the new balance. It really takes time, right? And mostly some in the change management books, it says it takes at least 6 months for you to really be comfortable with that new balance. So if you're actually feeling high and low on certain days about your environment, about how things are, it's okay, ride the wave. So whatever you're feeling right now, that is valid. That's really important. Okay, so then coming to family, I know there are parents who are really worried about children not working. If you have children below the age of 5 or 6, let them play. That is an area where we kind of neglect in a culture where we really push them to achieve. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, where they are actually being given a time to enjoy their childhood. So don't worry too much about kids who are below that age, but the other kids, if you will have do sufficient supervision, but ensure that you don't pressure them too much. And that's also because, sadly, for some children, school was their safety haven. Like they felt safe, and they wanted to go to school for them to get that feeling, right? Because in the home environment, they probably didn't have that, or the home environment was congested, or the home environment there were fights, right? And now these children are really trapped at home. And this student population is highly neglected, I feel, during this COVID time. Okay, so if we are parents, we have to be mindful of their space as well. So it's important to maintain our boundaries, even with a teenager. If they don't want to talk to you, or if they don't want to once in a while come and have a meal with you, to say it's okay, you can have your meal when you're not hungry, but know that tomorrow I would like you to come and have that meal. So there is a sort of a mutual respect within the house in this small space, but respecting the boundaries, respecting the privacy of the people around. Especially another thing, we are also doing a qualitative study. We are interviewing people during this time. So, another group of people who are finding it very difficult to cope during this time are people who are living alone. Okay, so this people who lived alone went to work to get that energy, because that's where they met people, and now they are again alone, and that has sort of created almost like an existential crisis. What is life? How long is this going to be? Like, what is the purpose, right? So we have in our research find out that in certain cases depression is setting in. And if you're one of the people who are living alone, if you're here, my suggestion is, even though it's sometimes tempting for you not to be in touch with other people on Skype or call, ensure that you speak to somebody at least once a day, at least one person a day, and have a meaningful conversation. It's not a hi-bye conversation, but it's just to have some a meaningful conversation. There are also some of us here who may be living with our elderly parents, right? And you may not have the same, and maybe your outlet was work. When you went to work, you felt alive, you were with your peers, but now you're actually with your elderly parents, and you find it difficult for 24/7 to be the caretaker, plus also to be doing your work. Okay, and sometimes people can be naggy. I'm not telling only the elderly parents, it can happen between husband and wife. And we need to really remember that. Like, so if you are the naggy person, we really need to ask ourselves, are we pushing too much? Are we really respecting our boundaries? So that is very, and to sit down with your parents and have maybe like a 5-minute of a meaningful conversation. And when I say meaningful conversation, it doesn't really need to be words, right? It also means being present, right? This is something that I started doing with my sons. I told myself consciously, 5 minutes a day at least, you need to sit with them and really be like them. Enjoy what they are doing, not your agenda, but their agenda. So even if they're watching a cartoon, I would sit with them and I would enjoy that cartoon with them, right? But it's the presence. But I'm present there. My phone is not ringing. I'm not having a chat with anyone. So for the family, for that unity, for that cohesion, this presence is really important. What we say during this time when we are in the house, this is a really good time, I think, to go on a fast, because maybe like not all of us can access food, or maybe not all of us have that same type of money to actually go and enjoy the things that we did before. but you also can fast on other things. You can fast on words as well. So say, for example, you want to fight, you want to say something, but you hold back. And that is also in a way of fast, okay? That self-restraint, self-control, that will really help that sometimes the unity of the house. And during this time, that's really important. Socially, to connect with your friends. I know here in Sri Lanka, we can go out now, but we have to be cautious about, not going in large groups or things like that. But to really be, if you're still in lockdown, to be in contact with them, and that's really important. Once again, as I said before, people are the ones who have kept us here today, and we have in turn kept them in good health and good stead. So financially, that's a tricky one. In 2007-8 financial crisis, one of the highest suicide rates were reported in Japan after the crisis, and that's also because they found out how especially the Japanese, the man in the house would really have work as a part of his identity. So when he defined his identity, what he did was a large part of his identity. That is who he is. Now, we need to remember this, because like what happened was, when that job was taken away, when that person lost the job, then the question of who am I now that the job is gone, okay? This is the time also to remember we are much more than what we do. If you're a librarian, if I'm a psychologist, if there's somebody, a doctor or a teacher here, we are much more than our profession, our careers. We are much more than the roles that we play in our society. We are much more than the cars we drive and the homes that we live in. So, and to really go and reevaluate what we are made out of is really important during this time, so that our focus on the financials, when I say financials, the material things, will be reduced. Of course, I understand that we all need a certain level of finances to live, to survive, especially when there are dependents in the house. But what I'm saying is the extra ones, the need and the want, there's a huge difference between these two. So to go and reevaluate that. But if you are facing a form of crisis, and if you're financial crisis, and if you're feeling that in the next 3 months that your job is at risk, this is a really good time for you to sit down and do your accounts. You need to get your spouse involved in this. If you have teenage children, at some point get them involved in this, because they are expensive, and to really write down, okay, what is the minimum amount that I need to live for this month? Just to have that planning, financial planning. If there are bankers here, accountants here, and if you're generally good with this, it is also a good time to help other people to plan their finances. And I can tell you, not all of us are good in that, right? We think we can, but some of us have very poor financial skills. Then moving to the spiritual aspect of it. Spiritual aspect is, I think, is in the core of this COVID, is this question of, see, you've been given a very unprecedented crisis. How are you going to act now? Who are you now? Okay. So the level of alignment that you have with your belief, your faith, your philosophy during this time is really important. And if you're doing meditation, if you pray, I urge you to continue to do that, because that is something that's really going to help you, not only now, even in the future. This is a question. Once one of my supervisors asked me, I'm in a job where predominantly I need to give, right? So when somebody comes and talks, I have to listen and I have to reflect it back. So this takes a lot out of you, right? After about 3 clients, and difficult clients, you're sort of drained. One day a supervisor said, Roseanne, you really need to find out what can fill you, because you're giving it, and if you don't know what's going to fill you, what is it that you're going to give, right? So it's like a well. If your well is full, anyone can draw the water out, and you can very generously give that water. But what if your well is empty and it's almost muddy inside, right? So when somebody is drawing that water, thinking that it's water, what's coming out is actually mud, right? So spirituality is a very good form of filling yourself with something that can align you, that can make you feel alive, that can also give you a sense of purpose in life. It can also define why COVID um, is probably, for some of us, may be the best times of our lives, if you actually go a few years ahead, and in hindsight, if you look back, this could be our changing moment in our lives. This could be the time that we put away things that are unnecessary. This could be the time that we realize life is short. This could be the time that we realize the people who are precious to us. Okay, so the spiritual skills are very important. In fact, in a study recently, I've said one of the best things you can give your children in a very volatile world is actually your spiritual skills, because your resilience comes from that level of spirituality, that depth that you have as a person in your identity. So and if so, get your children involved in this activity. Whatever you do, teach them how to meditate, teach them how to pray. If it is scriptures that you're listening to, get your children to do that. I'm pretty sure that you're doing all this, and then what I'm saying is actually a refresher. Mental, there's a lot of negative information out there. Okay, not only COVID, in the States, the Black Lives Matter movement, things that you see, the accidents to the crime to everything that you report, what they report on news, very sensationalized, but very negative. Okay, but what does it do to your brain if you keep feeding yourself with junk, right? So if you imagine like you're eating junk all the time, so your mind also needs food, but what you're giving it is all negativity, right? So we have to ask ourselves, we have to be strict with ourselves and say, I'm not going to watch news, for or today, or if I'm watching news, I'm going to limit it for half an hour, right? So we have to be disciplined enough to really shut that out. Then once again, we have to also maybe the things that can really help you relax mentally. Watching movies. It could also be puzzles or Scrabble and things like that can really keep your mind stimulated. We are moving to emotional. Now this is going to be the largest part of today's session. Now, how can I know what your responses were in terms of how you were feeling? In the chat group, how can I find that out?
It's been published in the Q&A, Roseanne. So
Okay.
a few of them have responded. One person has said that they're lazy. One has said scared, feeling
Okay.
into darkness. Have you found it?
I have not. Jessica, just read them to me, Jessica.
Okay, so there's feeling into darkness. One person has said very sad, can't meet friends, feeling lonely. A lot of online academic activities, very stressed. Life can't go anywhere. Parents don't allow, fear of virus. I think a bad karma of all. That is one comment. Then another person has said that they're feeling depressed. Another said they're feeling very low. And we have one as well saying that they feel enlightened.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you. I'm going to go back to what I was sharing before. Okay. See, whatever you're feeling right now, we're actually now talking about emotional well-being, right? That last aspect of our wheel. Whatever you're feeling right now, you have to acknowledge it. It's okay. We are all human beings, right? And you know, this is part of life. Maybe you could be happier, but if you're not happy that way, you are depressed. Yes, I am depressed. Okay, to really acknowledge it. The moment you accept that and say it's okay, this is a difficult time, right? You give yourself permission to relax. Otherwise, what you do is you sometimes can compare yourself with someone else and say, how come that person is happier than me? What are that person's circumstances? This, in your mind, you debate so much about how you should be, and you can become very self-critical, and you can expect a lot from yourself. During this time, one of the things that we really need to remember is that we got to be gentle with ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves, because uh, uh, something that we had control over is largely being taken away from us, right? Now, we don't have control over certain things. So to really ask ourselves, do we have control over something? If the answer is no, okay, so let it be. Park that, okay, park that aside and focus on what you have control over, and start focusing on those, and do something about it. Actually, these are some of the emotions that we were told that people were feeling during this time. In here in Sri Lanka, we are actually coming. We don't have a lockdown per se. People have to take caution when they go out. But when it happened, at the when I did the webinars in March and early April, the emotions were shocked, slightly, kind of surprised, but people kind of liked that surprise because, you could stay at home. I'm talking about people who are working, right? And people thought, oh, this is like the holiday that I always wanted, that sort of thing. But it really hit when we were doing the webinars in mid to rather late April, early May. It has then become a bit of frustration, right? A bit of worry. Now, so these are the ones that are like in big letters are the ones that were most common, right? The yellow ones were the negative ones. So the frustrated, worried, angry, stressed, powerless, isolated, bored, disconnected, overwhelmed. These were some of the things that came up. And on the other side of it, there were people who actually felt calm and grateful and thankful. Some of the people felt like we are really thankful for what we have. Okay, so almost like it got us to really be appreciative of what we had. But it was like almost a curve during this time, right? So we actually, this is Kubler-Ross model of grief. I know that we speak a lot of in organizations. We say, oh yes, we can build things up, we can come back to normal. Yes, we can. That's true, but we really don't talk much about the grief that some people are feeling, because if we don't address this grief that we may be feeling as people, as families, as organizations, that bouncing back to normalcy will take a longer time. Okay, so to address it and to be okay with it, and say, hey, it happened to all of us. Perhaps all of us one day will look back and be very grateful for these times, right? So in this curve, so what we were saying, now you actually mentioned some of these words. So I'm thinking that some of you who mentioned this in the curve, there was frustration and depression. Okay, but hey, in the you you may be hearing some noise from outside. That's actually my son. Do excuse me for that. Um, Also, remember that depression is it's not it's right now. If it is as a result of COVID, it's a temporary one. Okay, so it's something that will shift. and it's up to you. When you look at the crisis, ask yourself, what is it that is in my control and what I can do right now. I'm going to skip some of these slides. I'm going to go into something that you can remember and also you can share with other people. Okay, this is a very easy model to remember in terms of coping, how we cope. Basic pH. Okay, B is our belief. So in research, as I mentioned before, in the spiritual well-being, our beliefs give us a huge amount of strength during times of volatility. It's like where we anchor ourselves. The truth, the way we know how, right? Like, for example, we represent different religious and ethnic backgrounds, but for all of us, there is some form of belief. And during crisis, this belief really helps us to be anchored to a greater truth, to something larger than ourselves, right? In fact, in research, it says people who are happier and people who also live longer. So this research was done on people who are much older, but who also reported to be happy, and they found out that some of these people have these people had in something in common. They were part of a particular church or a temple or a kovil or a mosque, and they had a group of people who they would go to their places of worship with, and they had certain activities that they did in their place of worship as a group. So there are two things. One is spirituality. The other one is actually social group. Okay, so that really helps us. Second one is affect. Affect is actually emotions. This is when we are stressed, we cry it out. I mean, destructive ways are like shouting, throwing things, and then we feel better thereafter. But affect is putting whatever that's inside out, right? So if you're in this position, if the washroom is the only place you have some privacy, it's always good to get that space and cry it out. Wash your face and then come out feeling fresh, because letting this emotion out is also really important. Okay, it's like accepting the fact that it's there, and you're also putting it out, because this emotion is a form of energy. So if you keep it inside, it's going to manifest in different ways. This is when we get headaches, when we have backaches, and like we have all of us have different symptoms of repressed emotion, and some of us also can't lose weight as a result of these repressed emotions, right? So to let it out is important. Third one is social. So we mentioned that before. Social groups are important. If something happens, you call someone up, tell them about it. But we also have negative social. That is, there are people like myself. When something goes wrong, I like to be on my own, right? I kind of lock myself in a room till I find a solution to it, and then I come out, right? And so if you're one of those people, that's still okay, and that's because we get our energy from inside rather than from the outside world. um, Imagination, but the thing is, in negative social, if you're going to withdraw for a really long time, that can really be destructive, because you will really go down, like it will be like a downward spiral. You're not allowing anybody to help you, and you're thinking you're okay. So another thing about negative emotion is negative emotion can easily pull you down. So once you feel you have taken your time in private, go out and then meet your people and tell somebody about what happened or how you're feeling. That will help you better. Imagination in research, and if you look at some of the best artists in the world, be them painters, writers, poets, musicians, they created the best form of their of art during times of depression and crisis, rather than times of happiness. Okay, so this says something about us. This is a good time for us to be creative. If you had some creative goals sparked there, get those books out, sketchbooks out or books out to write poems, poetry, to do sketches, to whatever that creative outlet you had. You know, some of us, on Facebook, you see that, you know, people sing and people compose. See, this particular piece of research also says that this shows that we have the capacity to convert something potentially negative into something constructive. Okay, so focus on that. What can your depression do? What can your loneliness do during this time? Can you create an outlet, or can there be a creative outlet through which this negative energy can be channeled? Then there is cognitive, that is how you think. So for example, to say, yes, this is probably a difficult time, but it's happening to all of us. Let's sit down and figure out whether we could be better persons as a result of this. Okay, so you're thinking, right? Okay, we are going through a difficult time, but there are worse people who go through much more sort of crisis, maybe even before COVID. Okay, so even the fact that you and I are able to connect like this on a webinar says something about our level of you know, our access, you know, our privilege. So I think there is a lot of appreciation that can come as a result of that. So cognitive is looking at the problem from a different pair of lenses, asking ourselves, can we look at this from a different side, through a different window? I'll give you an example. If you have a garden and if you have some windows, how you can open one window, or you can open half of the curtain and look at the garden, right? But if you want to see everything, you have to open the entire curtain. So the way you view the garden, right, hence you allow the light to come into the room, largely depends on what window you open and how many windows you open. So my invitation also is that open those closed windows of the mind. Sometimes our mind is closed, and during times of crisis we can get into a closed mode. You know why that is? Neurologically, we are in a threat mode, right? And that is like, something is wrong, we have to be vigilant, right? And that part of the brain, that is actually the midbrain and the more primitive brain, that's not the brain here, right? That is like the thinking brain, but there's more the emotional brain. Is actually like it's scanning for threat from the outside world. So we are in a form of threat. This is why even when you go on Facebook, so many reactionaries, sometimes people don't even think before they comment, right? And that's because they are functioning from a place of threat. So in the brain, if you are looking at it, so this part is actually where we think. This is what human beings have that animals don't have. This is where we do maths from. Our language comes from here. But our emotions are actually in a place in the midbrain, in a place called the amygdala. Okay, but the amygdala doesn't have language there. You know, so this is why it's so very difficult. If you ask someone, hey, why are you feeling depressed? For the person who's depressed, it's so difficult to explain why that person is depressed. If you love someone, it's so difficult to explain that what that love is, right? Because it's coming from a place that emotion seat in the amygdala is very different to the language that is actually here. So they don't connect as such, right? So this is why creativity can really help you. So like people in poetry, using poetry, they are connecting language and that emotion that's in the amygdala to create something. So even in a similar manner, thinking, you're switching off that amygdala, so that what you're doing there is, yes, I do feel depressed. Let me take a step back. Let me look at my life as a movie. Okay. So if I am this person in the movie, what will I tell this person as a result of what I'm seeing now? So that is your thinking. You're shifting from this amygdala to the prefrontal cortex here. Okay. So thinking is really important. And then finally, physical. Physical is like what we mentioned before, physical activity research, over and above says physical activity. When we do a lot of physical activity, there are hormones, there are neurotransmitters that really help you to get more balance in your head, right? So which means as a result, you feel better. So if somebody is feeling low, the best thing that you could do is not to cook them a very oily meal, but it is to get them to do some exercises or play some cricket or football or something like that, where they where they can make their bodies tired. Okay. During this time, what you can eat also, like if you have vegetables and fruits, this is a good time to eat that and to really cut down on the oils and the sweets, especially the oils, because it takes longer. Especially if you're feeling a bit low and depressed and frustrated, those are the foods that you need to avoid. The fruits and the vegetables that has a lot of antioxidants. That's what's going to help you. Okay, finally, I know we are running out of time. Would love to talk to you more about the working aspect, how to manage teams and all, but I know we have to wrap up very soon. I'd like you to have a look at the screen here now. I want you to take a step back and think about your favorite movie, right? And the favorite actor in that movie, right? The main actor in that movie. Yeah, so this is actually a model in 2014. I published as a result of my notes with the clients, about 250 clients, how people faced crisis, and as a result, what happened. I don't want you to go through this model, but I would really like you to take a step back, sit back. Keep your hand on your stomach and breathe from your stomach. Okay, that's much more relaxing than breathing from your chest. So deep breaths, so that will relax you. Now, think about this close your eyes, think about this main character in that favorite movie. Okay, so as the movie started, you would have seen the character. He had a particular normalcy. So you knew who his friends were, or there was something about the main character. And then suddenly a crisis hits this main character. Okay, and then you see your main character trying to make meaning of this crisis. Okay, so you may open your eyes now. Now, the movie could have ended in so many different ways. One could be that your character gives everything up, perhaps commits suicide and, quits. So in that case, the movie is a pretty short movie. Okay. And then the other one is that it's an extended crisis. It's where you see your character doing the same thing, expecting different results. A lot of repetition in the movie, pretty boring movie. And I don't think you would have remembered that. Then the partial recovery. So you feel that your character is, yes, he's making an improvement, but you feel like, oh, it could have been better, right? So you recover, but only partially. But then you also see, and why you remember this movie and why you like this actor or the actress in this movie is that in this movie, your main character um, somehow meets the potential and really sort of climbs this almost impossible mountain, right? And then when he is up there, he sees the crisis very differently. As a result of this crisis, he's now a different person. He's at a different level. He has a different new equilibrium or a new balance. Okay. And he's hopeful. Okay. And this is why this movie has struck with you. This is why this movie is inspirational for you. So actually, if we look at our lives, okay, in the movie of our life, our individual lives, you and I are our main characters in these movies. You're the main character of your movie, life called the movie of life. I'm the main character in the movie of my life, right? So at the end of the day, it really depends on how we really want to end this, right? How we really want to take this crisis as an opportunity and as something that can really define us, right? Because things will change. Nothing is forever. But when it changes, who are we going to become? On the other side of it, what sort of a person would you like to become? Okay. And that is what I would like to leave you with. I also want to say that maybe as a main character of your movie, something to remember. Okay. Um, I don't, I'm sure you know this. It's like a lamp. In Sri Lanka, we call it a kuppi lampu. There is like a glass, it's like a case outside. So you light the lamp inside. Now, over a period of time, if you light it, you realize that sometimes the light becomes dim. And if you really closely look at it, it's not the light that has become dim, it's because you have not cleaned the case, the glass around it, right? And why I'm saying that is we are also like that. The light within us is still really strong, right? It's actually the case sometimes that's outside that really needs some cleaning. And in our when we cope, when we look at these crises, can we ask ourselves, can this be the moment where we do that cleansing so that the real light within us could shine, right? So with that note, I would like to stop, and if there are any questions, perhaps for the next 10 minutes, I could take some questions. Thank you. Jessica, will you be able to maybe ask a few questions that are there?
Sure, and there's not many at the moment. One person has said that employers, universities, and other authorities have increased the workload given to students and employees during the COVID-19 situation, and would like your opinion on that matter.
You need to ask to be realistic, right? During this time, we have to the workload. There was a particular workload, say for X amount of work, but as a result of COVID, there was there's a response from your organization towards COVID. So, for example, it could be that you need to ensure the safety of people, right? And so then X plus Y, right? So there is, I'm not saying this is for everyone. I also know there are people who don't have work and they get paid, right? For certain individuals, now it's not only what they did before, but it's also something else. So in that case, we need to ask ourselves whether this workload is actually justifiable. I do understand in certain cases, some of the in the other webinar, some also said was now we do so much more for the same amount, and people also now there is no respect for when we switch off, right? In that case, this is really important. You need to come together as a team and really define your team roles, right? Or rather the ground rules and the team roles. And there you say you check the first WhatsApp message at work at 7:30 or 8. See, there was a time before where you did that commute, right? You were on the road during that time. So to really say we are going to check our first email or first WhatsApp message at 8 o'clock, and when we are going to clock off at this time. But if you want us to work till this time, we will have to take a clear break in the middle. So I also know organizations where during the lunchtime, they have about 1.5 hours of time where they actually take a break. So during that time, you are not supposed to disturb your team members. But this, again, I'm telling you, it largely depends on your client base. If your client is a very demanding client at that time, you can't take breaks, right? But defining a new set of goals for your team is goals and rules for your team is very important. And to sort of be assertive sometimes, to say, look, I have two elderly parents at home, I have two kids at home, so I really need to clock off or switch off at 5:30. Is that okay? Because sometimes we don't say it. We think or we assume that the organization will understand. Well, sometimes they don't. Okay, it's like the one who is giving in a relationship. Okay, the taker will take uh, as much as they want, and then they would say, oh, I'm being taken for granted. But the question there is, did you do anything about it? Did you actually tell that person, look, what this is happening, this is not okay with me? Okay, Jessica, any other question? I can't hear you, Jessica. I can't hear you.
Sorry. There's another one that just came in. Somebody has asked, what do we do if we suddenly lose your job in this time of crisis? What can you suggest?
Okay, so I would say, because you're saying if we, what if we, you need to prepare for it. Okay, we call it more like the proactive coping. Proactive coping is that you expect, okay, this could happen to me. What is it that I could do now? Can you look at other avenues? So rather than depending 100% on your job, if you have the slightest sort of doubt that what if this happens, then look at the other avenues. Is there something that you can start at home? It could be like, sometimes people talk about being entrepreneurs. They think that they have to be this big famous entrepreneur, but there are very small scale entrepreneurs who are very profitable, right? They don't talk about it, but they're quite profitable. So you got to, from now itself, as I mentioned before, do your financials with people who are, your dependents and your spouse, and then also ask yourself, if there is another income, there's another way of income, how can we create it now? Prepare for it now, right? If your husband or if your spouse or another person in the house, they're not working, if you have a teenage daughter or a son who's just coming out of university or A levels, can you get them to be involved in this business or something, right? So, and ask yourself, in this pandemic, what are the things that will never go away? Things like agriculture, things like health, things like even education. We do know that no matter what, there will be some form of a demand. So to be relevant, see whether you can use the latest technology if that is possible, but be prepared.
There is another question from Jayabal. What kind of physical activities help to relax our mind?
Yoga really helps if you if you're doing it, you may have experienced it, but if not, you can Google, and on YouTube you can find, so yoga is connecting the physical body and also the mind. Okay, but also be careful about what type of music you listen to, what kind of movies you watch, the games you play. If there's a lot of violence in that, if there's a lot of negativity in that, even the music, that it's like the beat of the music is important. Sometimes when we are worried, what happens is, that beat sort of really, for some of us, it helps. But if that is the only thing that we are going to listen to, we are not going to come out of that emotional state. So play some relaxing music in the background. And we actually, in the house, we do that in the morning every day for the kids and for us as well. because that music, without us knowing, help us to relax. And then the physical activity again, even the exercises that you can do from home. Stretching is important because your stress tends to be be in certain places, your shoulders, your neck. So even while you're working, doing a few stretches and just looking up, looking down, looking sideways, standing and doing a bit of stretching, that's very important.
I think we can, there's one more question that we might be able to respond to from the Philippines. There are a lot of people being affected in this pandemic. Some lose their jobs, others retain them and have no choice but to work from home. Do you have any suggestions or ways on how a person will be able to deal with a lot of pressure, both financial and social, and what routines we can do in order to keep our mental state healthy and manageable?
Okay. So what I would first suggest is that there's a lot that's happening, okay? So the financial crisis, the social crisis, there's a lot that's happening. But find your anchor first, right? Find that one place that you could go to and say, look, whatever happens, I will have this. Then for some of us, it could just be a belief. It could be a faith, right? And start from there. Okay, now I'm anchored here. Let me see what's in my control. So what's in my control right now? You write it down. Okay, can I still send, can I help my son with the homeschooling? How many times can I dedicate for my work? How much of money do I actually have in the bank? Can I pay my debts, my loans? Okay, so you actually write those things down. Okay, and tick things that you can worry over and do something about. But there are also things you still worry over them, but you can't do anything about that at the moment. Okay, so you leave it out. Now, some of you may be very strong in your faith, in the philosophy that you believe in. In that case, surrender it. Surrender it to a larger force that you believe in, right? And it could be, some of you may say it's karma, some of you may say it's God. Whatever it is, you surrender that to God, or to the belief that you have. Okay, and unfortunately, that's the answer that I can give. I wish I could give more concrete answers, but this is very tough for most of us, right? But do start with your anchor. Okay, and that anchor usually is also your belief.
Would you like to take another question, Roseanne?
If we have time, yes, we'll make this the last question. Yes.
Okay, there's one more that's come in. If someone is an introvert, what would be some warning signs that they are isolating themselves too much?
Okay. So I saw this post on Facebook saying this is a time for introverts, right? And because you can't go out, and some of us are very happy being an introvert. Some of the warning signs would be that you are spending way too much of screen time in front of the screen. You don't want to talk to people. When the phone rings, that you want to ignore their calls. Also, you realize that your appetite has changed. So as a result of being alone, you're either eating too much or you're eating too little. You're sleeping too much or you're sleeping less. This is also with if there's husband and wife in the house. It's also the sexual drive. Sometimes people before COVID and during COVID, sometimes that drive also drops, right? And then, I mean, at the beginning, that happening is fine. That we losing sleep and thinking about things is fine. But after about 2 to 3 months, you need to ask yourself, as a person who may not who's an introvert, am I really, is this normal for me? Usually, if things were different, would I behave differently? If that's the case, forcefully, you pick the phone and call somebody, right? Force yourself to do that. Force yourself to have a conversation with someone, because otherwise, that self-isolation can become depression. Yes, Jessica?
I think that's about
That's
all
it?
the questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much, everyone. Thoroughly enjoyed sharing this time with you. And I have one request from you. Whatever you learned today, do go and share it with at least one person. Okay. So if we had 200, 300 people here, we are doubling that amount. So wishing you all the very best, and remain focused, remain anchored, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is time to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you very much for Sri Lanka Technological Campus giving the opportunity and to conduct this webinar. My sincere gratitude to our guest speaker, Ms. Roseanne Kure, for accepting my invitation and conducting timely and very informative presentation. And Ms. Jessica, thank you very much for your great supporting as a moderator today. And Mrs. Shirani Ranasinghe, guest of honor, the Deputy Librarian of the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. My gratitude goes to the participants who took valuable time out of your busy schedule to join us. I sincerely thankful for our marketing team for your great support. And last but certainly not least, a very big thank to our IT team, without whom this event wouldn't have been successful. Thank you very much again for presence and all your support. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay informed. Thank you.